I've owned both the Acer Predator X34 and PG348Q for around about 1 month each. I thought that I would share with you guys my findings as to the differences between the two and ultimately why I ended up returning the Acer X34 in favor of the PG348Q. Now that's not to mean that I'm going to poo-poo on the X34 at all. I just think that when it comes down to a $1,500 to $2,000 purchase, there are definitely some factors that I think you guys should be aware of when it comes to making the purchasing decision. First off is the aesthetics. The aesthetics of the panels definitely suit two different types of users. If you're someone like me who prefers a more minimalist and low-key design, then the Asus is definitely the one to go for. The Asus panel has this really refined brushed aluminium finish on the bottom bezel, as well as some really nice elegant accent lines, and the Asus logo actually blends in very well with it. It is reflective, so it's not completely subtle, but it blends in a lot nicer to the overall package than I feel the Acer X34 does. With the Acer X34, with it again being primarily a gaming first brand, you do get those red colors coming through, and my biggest problem in terms of the aesthetics with the monitor is the Acer Predator logo smack bang in the center. I can't get over it. It got to the point where I sat down at the end of the day and I had to convince myself over and over again, no, the logo isn't that bad. You can deal with this, man. You've spent $1,500, you can deal with a tiny little logo there. And it got to the point where, again, sitting down, I don't want to have to justify every single time I look at it a $1,500 purchase because I don't like the look of the logo. So that's one of the reasons why I swung towards the Asus panel over the Acer in terms of the aesthetic design. If you're talking about the stand, I think the Acer X34 definitely has the nicer looking stand. The Asus has this really odd anti-symmetrical stand with all these weird angles and stuff like that. It's not for me, but I would definitely recommend it if you're purchasing one of these to go with the base amount option, considering that you actually do have to have a fair amount of depth on your desk to actually push the monitor back to get a comfortable viewing distance. The Acer and Asus panels also have the same amount of bezels on the left, right, and top side. So the only difference between the two is that bottom bezel and the stand. The second factor being the color. Now, the out-of-the-box experience for the Asus panel was much better than the Acer. When I opened the Asus panel, it was very nice, crisp, clear colors that made me feel satisfied with my purchasing decision. With the Acer, that wasn't quite the same story. The whites weren't quite where I wanted them to be, and I had to do a bit of fiddling to get it looking on par with the Asus panel, which I find quite strange considering that the Acer X34 and the PG348Q both use exactly the same panel. The only difference being is that Acer and Asus would have implemented them differently and calibrated them differently from factory. So theoretically, you should be able to get the two looking pretty much the same. The only difference, I think, being the anti-glare coating that would have been used on both of the monitors. So out-of-box experience, the Asus wins on the color front. The third issue is something that I'm hesitant to bring up, but I think it should be mentioned all the same, and that's the quality control issues I had with the Acer X34. When I initially got the Acer X34, I found that I had horizontal banding of pixels on the top of the monitor, and that was very evident when it came to web browsing. So across all of the tabs, I could see these very faint horizontal lines. They were incredibly distracting. I posted on Reddit and a few other forums to see whether or not this was an isolated issue and I just had a dud panel, or whether or not this was more widespread. So I went into Computer Lounge, which is where I worked at the time, opened up 3 or 4 of the other X34s and found they had exactly the same issue. When I opened the Asus PG348Q, on the other hand, no issue at all. So while I feel this could be a very isolated issue when it comes to the purchasing decision between the two, I feel that I definitely should at least mention that if you're considering buying either of these panels. Number 4 being the build quality. I found that the build quality on the Asus was much better than the Acer. That's not to say that the Acer was poorly built, but it's very evident, especially in terms of the bottom bezel. If you press on the bottom bezel, there is a hell of a lot of flex on the Acer X34, whereas on the PG348Q, there's no flex at all. It's very sturdy, it's very solid and firm. The bottom bezel as well gives it a much more refined air in terms of the aluminium brush that they have on there. The X34, the bottom bezel, again, is relating to the aesthetics. It doesn't really give you this nice premium feel like you've really got what you've paid for when you're paying $1,500 to $2,000 on a monitor. Build quality for me goes towards the Asus. Reason number 5, and then this is going to be something that's not going to be relevant to everyone, but it's the on-screen display. I will mention that I'm a software developer and I'm learning about UI and UX, and it's something that's really important to me from a consumer and product perspective. The on-screen display on the Acer X34 has got to be the single worst on-screen display I have ever seen. The amount of button presses that you have to use on the X34 to access any functionality within the on-screen display is not acceptable, as well as the fact the physical button layout is really dumb. And by that I mean that you're using the second, third, and fourth buttons most often, and the very first button on the right hand side is something that powers off the monitor. So you'll occasionally accidentally power off the monitor while operating the OSD. It's a reasonably small gripe for a reasonably small subset of functionality within the X34, but it's something that really pisses me off. The on-screen display on the Asus panel is miles better. Instead of using 6 physical buttons on the right hand side, they use a joystick, which is a much better implementation. As well as that, the functionality within the OSD is much improved, it's much quicker to access things and change things. So for me, the OSD is a clear winner within the Acer vs Asus battle. To summarize, the Acer X34 and PG348Q, you're going to be getting exactly the same gaming experience whether you go for one or the other. It makes no difference. They're both 34 inches, they're both 3440 by 1440, they're both IPS. I can really sum this up in saying they're both the same panel. So if you go for the X34, it's not like you're going to be getting a drastically different experience to the Asus PG348Q. The only difference is going to be in how the overall package feels, the colors and the OSD, the user experience, that kind of thing. Should you get the PG348Q or the Acer Predator X34? It really comes down to what type of person you are. If you're the type of person that wants a completely refined package, who knows that they're getting the best possible build materials within a monitor, you're someone who wants to be impressed with the out-of-box experience, go with the Asus. You'll know that this is the best possible monitor that you can buy at this stage for a 34-inch ultra-wide high refresh rate experience. On the other hand, if you're someone who wants to save a little bit of money, if you're someone who doesn't really necessarily want the best of the best, or isn't too fussed about the build materials used, or the fact that the OSD is not great at all, go with the X34. The big thing between these two monitors, and something you don't have to worry about, is you're going to get the same gaming experience whether or not you get the Asus or the Acer. It's exactly the same. It's both equally as pleasurable when you're actually playing games. The only difference really comes down to general use and how you actually feel about using that particular monitor. So again, refined package, go for the Asus. If you want to save a little bit of money, don't care about the frills and stuff like that, go for the Acer. You'll definitely be happy with that purchase. I'm going to wrap the video up here, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found this quite useful. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm doing a lot more content recently, so I really hope that you appreciate that. And I will see you guys in the next one.